right, welcome back to another Kirby on Sports exclusively on the Kirby on Sports podcast YouTube page. As always, big thanks to our sponsors, PM Plus Reserve, Shenandoah Primitives, and Chief Graphics. Today we have on the show a person who pretty much does it all, Renee P Washington. She's the host of the Philadelphia Game Day, the Philadelphia Union Game Day pre and post game host. She's also a reporter for ESPN and Fox Sports. She also hosts the show Beyond the Headlines with Renee P Washington. Some of the many things she has done. So, Renee, thanks for being here. How you doing?
I'm great. Thank you, Josh, for that awesome introduction. I'm happy to be here and excited to chat with you.
Absolutely. So, I mean, where I like to start with pretty much every one of my guests is COVID. It's been a big deal anywhere you look in this community. So, with everything you have going on, has anything with your job been affected by this? And can you tell us exactly what has changed for you and how you have been able to handle it during this pandemic?
Ooh, well, my running joke for the last almost a year now has been that everything except for my name and my immediate family, for the most part, has changed. It's been insane, and I can't even wrap my head around who I was. I think a year ago today, as we would still have been mourning the loss of Kobe and Gigi Bryant and all those in the accident, we were just getting into the new year, like just how unsuspecting we were coming into February and March, and just the way that everything has changed going back to early 2020. So I have changed in so many ways. I think for the better for most of them. I'm fortunate that I've been able to remain healthy as well as many around me, including my family and friends. I have lost some people to COVID. And I'm not going to diminish the fact that so many lives have been lost to COVID. And that does not take away the severity and just how tragic it has been. But from a growth perspective, personally, professionally, financially, I mean, there's just so many aspects that I've really reined in on focusing on myself. And I know a lot of people have been doing that more and more around COVID, focusing on themselves and spending more time pouring into themselves. But I really have been doing that. So the incredible thing is, as you mentioned, I wear many hats, and I was actually just talking to someone on social media about how we always feel the need to share everything we have going on. I'm actually not. So to many, I may seem very out in the open on social media, very active, which I think I'm pretty active. But for all that's going on, there's like 90 things that you don't know. You might know 10 things, but there are 90 things you don't know. There's always more. So I think for me, I've been able to focus a lot more on growing professionally, building some things up that I've had planned. I'm still in the process actually of working on some things that will come to light when the time is right. That rhymes. But overall, literally everything except for the fact that my name is Renee Washington has changed.
Well, yeah, that's pretty great to hear from you. So, there are a lot of avenues I want to go down, with you, but I want to start with, beyond the headlines. Yeah, you've been able to get a very wide variety of guests on, and I've listened and I've really enjoyed the content you put out. So, can you tell us a little bit about beyond the headlines and what you mainly focus on?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is it's a show that I try to make like no other. So when I was creating the show, I wanted it to be unique in the content, the conversations, the information that was brought out. Because working in so many different areas of sports, as you mentioned, pregame and postgame shows, doing sideline reporting, color commentary, anchoring, being on so many different in so many different aspects of reporting. I wanted it to be something that had its own personality. But then I also wanted it to be different from anything that you mainstream TV or the usual topics that are discussed across not only the sports world but news in general. If you turn on your TV, and I've done this and I did this actually today, and you watch ESPN all day, you're going to get the same stories over and over again. Different show, different people talking about it, same stories. So I wanted to create something that was different. Beyond the Headlines captures that exact concept of like we're going beyond just the mainstream headlines. We're going to talk about what's going on in sports or major news but I'm also looking to bring storylines that you may not have gotten if you turn on any app or any news or any sports channel. So it varies. It's not just sports, and I try not to pigeonhole myself. I think that's the biggest thing with my career, my identity, my brand that I try to create is I'm more than just a blank, more than just a sports reporter, more than just a former athlete, more than just a model, more than just like one thing. And I really try to diversify myself. So the show is an extension of that. You get news, you get sports, you get entertainment, you get music. And one of the biggest things I've seen is as the show continues to grow, it's only been a little over a year. As the show continues to grow, I now have people that are reaching out, or it becomes a lot easier. I know we were talking about the difficulties of booking guests. Well, as the show grows its own personality and identity, it does become easy. People now understand, okay, this is the type of show. It aligns with who I am. I want to be a part of it. Versus in the beginning where I had to do a lot more explaining of like, this is the show, this is what I strive to do, this is like where we air and when. Whereas now it's gotten a little bit more traction in that sense. So I'm fortunate that I have a number of great PR people, personalities, different connections that me to get in contact with some great guests, and we'll see where it goes from here.
Yeah, I mean, once again, you do great work with Beyond the Headlines, so keep that up first and foremost. But I mean, from the standpoint of booking guests and stuff, has it been easier during COVID because everybody was like staying at home? And for me, at least, I could get a ton of people that like had sports seasons canceled and stuff. Did you find that any easier that you were able to interview more people during that time?
So yes and no. I think that I've started doing that has is I pre-record a lot of interviews. Most that people here tend to be and have been interviewed a month or two in advance. So it does give me that flexibility that when life does get hectic, when my jobs pick up or something is chaotic, that I don't have to worry about scrambling for a guest. And I think that's the biggest difference. When I first started the show and I was sticking to every Wednesday at 12 o'clock p.m. Eastern time, like you were going to get a new episode, I found myself scrambling late at night, like trying to get all these interviews in, or Tuesday, like quickly trying to get everything out. And it just became stressful. So something that has helped me is by booking in advance. Not only does it give me flexibility around my schedule, because my schedule actually is it's just as chaotic but in a different way. So maybe there are more things I'm doing at home, but they're just as much being in front of a camera or being busy in that sense. It's not like I'm just sitting around all day watching Netflix. So my schedule is not any easier. So by pre-booking and pre-scheduling in that sense, it has allowed me to have more flexibility that if something major does happen, fine. I'm not tied to any specific story running at a specific time, but I do try to have timeless interviews, which I think also ties into the show itself, because an aspect of headlines is not every single story is time sensitive. There will be some stories where you're just hearing about someone's journey, and that can air today or that can air next year, and it will still have similar, still be able to gravitate to any sort of audience in some way. So I actually, when sports shut down, especially moved away from, I mean, we had to. Part of what I'd moved away from, there's no sports to cover. So let me get more of those human interest stories. And it's kind of carried into this year. But, my goal is always to continue to weave in major stories, major things going on. Like we had stories that were focused around I did a segments focused around the NBA finals, specific to what's going on in sports, but then also having the flexibility. So for anyone that has a show, I definitely recommend that. Have those interviews in the vaults that you can go to. So let's say it's hectic and you don't have time or you can't book a guest. Okay, that's fine. I've got something else in the works that I can always add in and drop in.
That's a great idea. Great point right there. So, let's talk about this. You cover the Philadelphia Union, as I mentioned, introducing you into the show. So can you tell us a little bit about how that works? sort of like behind the scenes, so to speak?
Yeah, it's a really great experience. Having played soccer myself and having a chance to work at the professional level in soccer is a dream. It's incredible. I do still have players that are in the MLS or in the NWSL that I played with, that I grew up with. So it's awesome to still be connected to the game in that way. And behind the scenes, in a sense, it's working on pregame, halftime, postgame shows, bringing content. It is on TV, it is live, so it's a different beast in itself. Live recorded, a show versus like a pregame show. There, every aspect has its own elements to it. So it's a lot of preparation, but one thing that I've always learned and have always tried to tell others is when you sports preparation never really stops. So it technically doesn't really start. It's not just a matter of, oh, I have a game, this game, let me start preparing 4 days in advance. Like I'm preparing now. The league is gonna get started for the MLS in April. April stopped. You have to stay engaged. You have to stay up to date on what's going on. You've got to make sure you're following all the trades and draft picks and behind the scenes stories going on, which makes it a lot easier getting into the shelves to be able to just make them more conversational versus cramming information in at the last minute. So, for the union specifically, we would do like be about a 30-minute show actually pregame. Of course, there's commercials in there and things like that. So you're not on air the entire 30 minutes. Halftime might be 5 minutes between and sponsorships and things like that, since that is a time for soccer that they actually put all the commercials, the majority of them is actually during halftime, since it's not like basketball where there are timeouts and media timeouts. So it is a little different in that sense. And then also post game is then a quick recap of, okay, this is what happened in the game, this is major storylines from the game, and let's look ahead to the next one. So the preparation for each segment in itself is different, but again, it never really stops. You're just continuing to stay up to date on what's going on.
So I don't want to call myself an expert on the MLS, but I was sort of reading on the MLS, and this Philadelphia Union team ended up first place in the MLS standing. So I assume there's a lot to talk about on
So,
this past season with the Union.
yes, definitely. So it has been an exciting time to be involved with the Philadelphia Union. I mean, whether it was their success on the field or even players like Brendan Aronson off the field, Mark McKenzie that just signed major international contracts. There's a lot of buzz going on around the Philadelphia Union, and I just feel like soccer in general is really catching on for a lot of people. I've always known it's a great sport, that's why I played it, but not everybody has understood it and recognized it in that way. So I think it's awesome timing. I mean, Kevin Durant also recently became a part-time owner for the Union. Now, though they did disappoint many by not reaching the MLS Cup and getting knocked out in the playoffs, which in itself was a shock, it's a very encouraging couple of years. And so looking ahead should be a group that is competing for the title. So for me personally, that makes my job that much easier in that sense and that much more enjoyable, that the games that I remember, thinking back to the season specifically, the games I was a part of were all exciting to not only cover, but to watch as a fan. So it makes reporting on it that much easier. Of course, working with a team like the Wizards, for example, who I also work with, it is a little more difficult when your team's not doing well. So as a reporter, as a fan of any sport, of course, it just makes it a lot more exciting. Fans are more into it. People are more interested in what you have to say. People are following more. And so it just makes my job specifically that much easier and that much better in that sense, in a rewarding way.
So, like mentioned earlier, you played Division 1 soccer. So do you think that helped you in a sense from transitioning from a soccer player to covering soccer for the media, since you know the game? Like has that were there any sort of differences there, or could you really just jump in and like, oh hey, I know what's going on here, so on and so forth?
Yeah, definitely. I think being a former athlete, having played at a high level and experience to play some professional soccer, um, even I coached college soccer. All these experiences just give me great perspective, and that's what I always like to let people know is that it's more than just the fact that I played the sport so I understand it, which is definitely a benefit in itself, but also the fact that it's really helped in the sports industry, which is very competitive. It is very cutthroat. It is very similar to what I faced as an athlete. So the similarities on in terms of like work ethic and preparation and all the different components that go into it, that is actually one of the biggest things that soccer has given me. Not to mention, I dealt with a lot of politics. I dealt with, it wasn't all great. It was not all easy either. So, for many, hearing that I'm a former three-time All-American and played professional and coached in college, that's great and all. But there were a lot of bad days, bad experiences, bad coaches, bad just environments, toxic environments, and different things I dealt with, politics, racism, so many aspects of it. So I think beyond just the success that I had and the experience itself, also the experiences of having to learn how to navigate through being a soccer player to get to where I was. It's actually what led to me being an All-American that has helped me the most as a professional. Not even just the success at the top, it was just the climb to get there that really helped. That the trials, the tribulations, so to speak, that's really what helped prepare me the most. And then in terms of like understanding any sport, it's always a different beast because you do have to get to know the players, the coaches, all the contracts and details around it. And so regardless if you play a sport or not, that's always difficult because you do have to pay attention through a different lens. But without a doubt, being an athlete made the transition for me that much easier, but more from the standpoint of understanding the rigorous, fast-paced, adrenaline rushing environment, and being able to adapt in situations and being able to juggle things. That's honestly what started with me in my life way before I even graduated college. Those are the same personality traits and things that I learned through sports. So yes and no, actually.
The great point there. So you also you've covered football and basketball, as you mentioned, with the Washington Wizards. Um, Out of the three, is there a certain one you favor covering over the other? Or is there a harder one out of the three, something like that, since you cover so many?
Yeah, so that's a good question. To be honest, it's there's layers to it, and I always hate to say this, but I actually prefer to cover basketball the most, and here's why. So I grew up in a basketball family. I do not have many relatives that played soccer. My older sisters played soccer, which is how I got started, but I was the first to reach the heights that I did in soccer. I do have a number of relatives that played at a high level. My dad played professional basketball overseas. My uncle played in the NFL. I have relatives that played at a high level: track, boxing, basketball, football, nobody in soccer. So I was kind of the first in that sense to reach the levels that I did. So for me, basketball is what I grew up watching. Like I can tell you word for word, players, coaches, moment, 2001 when the Sixers lost 4-1 to the Lakers. Like I can remember things so much easier because everything that we watched growing up was basketball. Now we did watch football and we did watch soccer and we did watch a lot of sports, but the majority of my family has always been built around basketball. So aside from that, I also like selfishly, basketball is a controlled environment. Soccer, football. Now, I loved it as a player. Do not get me wrong. I loved playing games in the rain. I remember playing in the snow. I remember playing in extreme heat. But when you're on camera and it comes time to talk and have to look professional and it's 10 degrees outside and you're like shivering, I will take basketball any day of the year. So selfishly, because of the actual weather itself, I do prefer basketball, but I love covering all of them because they each bring something different. Soccer, whenever I cover soccer, it makes me very nostalgic. It's like that reality check. Like, I can't believe I'm done. I can't believe all those years, which seems like so long, are over. Football and basketball are just such great experiences because those are two of the sports, as I mentioned, growing up that I watched. I wanted to be in the WNBA. I wanted to play professional basketball too. So now having a chance to cover those leagues is kind of also like a reality check, like, wow, this is special. So I enjoy all of them, but yeah, I guess
So
basketball.
So let's sprinkle some sports news into this and stuff. You mentioned you cover the Wizards. They're unfortunately not playing too well. Russell Westbrook, as you know, traded from Houston for John Wall, and they just don't look good. And Russell Westbrook, I mean, he's nursing an injury, and the Wizards just got done with a huge bout with the coronavirus, canceling game after game after game. I mean, they just now started playing again. So, in your opinion, what do you think the Wizards have to do to get better from this huge slump that they are in?
It's really tough because coming in, I was one of the biggest advocates for keeping Bradley Beal, building around him. Way before we even heard that the news that John Wall and Westbrook were going to be traded. I was telling people if it had to be between Wall and Beal, you have to go with Beal. He's younger. He's still in his prime. He's got so much more potential. John Wall coming off of a few years of season-ending injuries, you just didn't know what to expect from him. He had also been in DC for 10 years. So I felt like it was time for him to move on. But honestly, I now feel like it's time for Bradley Beal to move on too. Russell Westbrook coming in, I thought that he would help. And I think he has, to be honest. I think a lot of people are quick to point out Westbrook and blame him. And at the end of the day, the team as a whole doesn't have enough. You cannot be a top team in the league with just two players. You need two top players. Don't get me wrong. You look at the Lakers with AD and LeBron. You look at the Nets, who now have a big three in Harden, Kyrie Irving, and Irving. You need to have at least two all-star caliber players, but your supporting cast has to be able to consistently contribute in some way. And the Wizards do not have that. You don't know always who the number three guy is going to be. Davis Bertans, Rui Hachimura. We know that Thomas Bryant is out with a torn ACL. There are no consistent, experienced, talented players that every night are going to bring you points like you need. I mean, I watching the Lakers play the Sixers. It's not just LeBron and AD versus Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. You have players for the Sixers like Seth Curry, Tobias Harris, who hit the game-winning shot, KCP, who hit what would have been the game-winning shot for the Lakers if Tobias Harris hadn't scored. You need other pieces, and I think it's easy for people to blame Westbrook and even at sometimes Beal, but there's more. So I think honestly, to on track, so to speak, or to get on track, so to speak, Beal has to be moved because I feel for him. He literally is in the prime of his career at 40 points a game for the most part. I mean, you look at the 10 games they've lost, he's scored like 34 and more points each game, and they're still losing. It's just a shame to see him put so much in, and watching them lose to the Rockets the way they did, getting blown out. John Wall on the other end, healthy and winning. Bradley Beal defeated literally and figuratively. I think the move has to be get rid of Bradley Beal, bring in some more young players. They've got to get it right in the draft. I mean, the last 2 years, I thought they did well with their picks, but I still think they don't have enough pieces. There's not enough there. You have a lot of guys that on another team, I don't know that they'd play as much as they do with the Wizards. So there's no easy answer, but I think they need to be in full rebuild mode in that sense.
I couldn't agree more with that. I want to talk about Houston. There was a lot of drama with James Harden and stuff, and they ended up trading him to Brooklyn, as you said. Brooklyn looks dominant over there with James Harden now. I want to get your thoughts on that whole thing with Harden and Houston causing all that drama, and how you think Harden will help the Brooklyn Nets in the future.
I'm actually not fully sold on the Brooklyn Nets, and I have no problem saying that. And I'm just not convinced. I do feel as though they're very impressive. Don't get me wrong. I mean, you have three of the best scorers on one team. Personalities down the stretch are really going to work come playoff time. So while I think they should be a team that is not only coming in East but winning a championship, I think we're going to see them hit a wall. And I say that because I said in the past about the Clippers, but I didn't say it as vocal as I should have. So when they did choke, it was kind of like an I told you so moment, but I'm now saying it, so it's on the record. I have no problem with that. I don't think the Nets are going to in the long run. I don't think this move is going to help them. They literally got rid of everything in the kitchen sink. I mean, Jared Allen, who's a player in the paint. You got rid of all your youth. Karis LeVert, although he's now injured, honestly, Karis LeVert is a great player. And I just move everybody, draft picks, their bench. One of the things that I liked about Brooklyn with KD and Kyrie leading them was they did have a bench. You had a player like Karis LeVert coming off the bench who is a player that would be a starter on another team. So I do think that they actually lost something in that sense because I look at their game they had against the Hawks. James Harden is taking a million dribbles to just knock down the game winner. He misses, they go into overtime. Then you see Kyrie and KD step up. So right now it's kind of working. But those moments of who has the ball down the stretch, that is going to be an issue. Come clutch moments, who's your go-to player? And I don't think the three of them are going to be able to vibe together enough to be unselfish enough and be able to defer to someone else. So I think there's going to be that issue. There's only one ball. And for this team, I think that's an issue. I also think defensively there could be some issues there, and I just see it coming to a head. So while the Nuggets are very impressive, there's a mistake, and actually I think Houston made out more in this deal. So by moving James Harden, he's a player to me that, for as talented as he is, he's never going to help you win a championship because he literally dribbles the air out of the ball, and it's painful to watch, and I can't imagine it's fun to play with either.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to get your thoughts. Minus the whole Wizards COVID outbreak, for the most part in general, how do you think the NBA has handled COVID in your opinion? Like your
Another
opinion
good
on that.
question. I do think they're doing as well as you really can do, given the circumstances. I know they came out once last bit, including the Wizards. A number of games are postponed. It seemed like they came out with some new protocols to try to really hone in on you can't see anybody on road trips. Nobody should be in your hotel room, minimizing interaction as they're traveling. It's tough though, because how long is this going to last? I think that's the hard part. I think initially, whenever these rules are made, it's easier to follow it the first week or so. But we're in January now, as we near February, and we're talking about the season going into the summertime. How many people are going to be able to consistently continue to do this? Now, of course, the vaccine is out. It seems like medically things are moving in the right direction, but we have no idea how long it's going to take for all this to start to really set in. I know from the beginning there was discussion around COVID needing to take a full year to run its course before we finally can have the proper medications and vaccinations that can help. So I think the NBA has done well as of now. And it reminds me similar to what the NFL did. Starting out the NFL season, there were some major hiccups, games that had to be moved, a number of players, and even down to the end, actually. What I think is going to happen is we'll continue to see, similar to like the Browns having a COVID breakout as they're trying to get into the playoffs. I think we're going to see some teams, unfortunately, take a hit. And like the Wizards did when they had to miss 4 games, I imagine that it's going to happen again. But I'm hopeful that they can at least continue to play the season safely, of course, and kind of work through it. But with having less players on the roster and needing a minimum of 8 players healthy, that's a concern.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more with that. So, do you think the NBA would have been successful if they started off this season in a bubble? Do you think that could have been possible at all?
It's tough because last year, the reason why the bubble really worked was because it was not the entire season and it was not the entire league. So having a bubble for just the seeding games and the playoffs, first of all, it made it more exciting because they had gone all that time without playing. So I think players were just excited to play again. And then also with it getting right into playoffs so quickly, it made each game that much more exciting. But to have regular season games in a bubble, meaningless games, so to speak, in a bubble, and that's a lot, on top of the fact that players are just coming out of a bubble. So to put them back into one, I don't think it would have worked. Mentally, physically, I think we would have seen a lot more players that were having issues staying in the bubble. I know the G League is doing a bubble down in Disney right now. Of course, it's less teams and everything, but I think to have a second bubble season after already having last year would have been too much. Now, I do like what I think hockey is doing with having more regional bubbles in that sense, where you're only playing games within the region and you're not really traveling to their teams. I think there are other alterations that could have been looked into, but it's hard because there are so many teams. And even with them playing back-to-back nights, playing the same team back-to-back, which I thought was a pretty decent idea, because they have to squeeze so many games into the course of a week, teams exposed, like the Sixers had rumor of someone being exposed. They've already faced like 3 teams in that past week. So I don't really know how you can go about it. They shortened the season, yes, but there's still so many games being played, such a quick turnaround, so much travel that there's too many moving parts. So I don't know. I have no idea. I think they're trying their best. It seems like they're constantly reevaluating, but we'll see how it plays out.
I just wish this pandemic would end so we can get back to normal sports seasons, for
I
crying out
know.
loud. It's like these shortened seasons. There's a hockey game on TV every single day because they're only 58 games. And I believe the NBA shortened a little bit. I'm not really sure how much, but I know
Yeah,
there
they're
are
down to like 72 games.
yeah, that's like 10 less than before. So that shortens down, like you said, quick turnaround time. Yeah. So
Exactly.
yeah, a lot of interesting stuff with the NBA for sure. Thank you for diving in on that with us, Renee. And before we let you go, I wanted to discuss your new venture you just started, Planted Not Buried. It's a new. Now, I'll let you discuss it, but I'm a part of it. I really enjoy it. I wanna get your thoughts on what made you want to start it, and if anybody can join, tell them how they can join, and just tell us the reason behind Planted Not Buried.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Josh. Planted Not Buried is a nonprofit. It's an organization that is kind of something I've been sitting on for years now, years to build and how to put together. And I feel as though I often have conversations with people, and even like a question you had, Josh, of where do I buy a microphone? Where do I go to get tutors for my kids? Where do I go to find the right ring lights? Like there are so many different questions that people have that they just don't know who to ask. And I was having a conversation. What was the final straw was I was someone, and she's actually a survivor of rape, and she was sex trafficked. She dealt with a lot of things throughout the course of her life, and she's only 19. And so for her, she was telling me how she really does not have resources, anyone to turn to, anyone to, she's been seeking counseling, but she doesn't know who to ask. She doesn't know, like, she's like, I'm 19 years old. I have all these things that have happened to me, and I have no idea how or where to even begin getting help. And she was saying how everything is so expensive and so difficult. So for me, I just felt as though having different conversations with people who shared similar sentiments that I need help and I need it, but I can't afford it or I can't find it. So I was thinking this is just an opportunity for people, and it doesn't have to be anything tragic, anything extremely life altering. It could be something as simple as looking for the right microphone for your podcast. But these are questions that should not be so difficult to find answers to. And I'm in a number of organizations, and they're all are specific to certain things, being a sports reporter, being a Black journalist with NABJ, all these different areas, but nothing that really embodies it all. So what I wanted to create with Planted Not Buried is an opportunity for people to connect with anyone and everyone, regardless your job, your affiliation, where you live, where you're from, to be able to connect. It is on Slack right now because it was the best platform I can think of that is free and doesn't have any sort of cap space or anything like that. Twitter, Instagram, all those different things. There's all these limitations into the number of people you can have in a group, and not everybody has like a Facebook, for instance, but Slack is an app. So it's free to download and you can join the conversation and now you can meet other people. So my goal is to continue to grow it. It's only been officially launched for a little over a month now, but to continue to grow it as a space where you can have almost like any resource you need. I'm building a directory for people to be able to just, if you're looking for anything and any type of service, it's easy to find. But the biggest thing with it is as we're going through our lives, and this is where the name comes into play, and we're trying to take that next step, it shouldn't be so difficult. It shouldn't be so hard to find a mentor or find guidance or find support or someone to encourage you. You should feel like you have a village around you that you can turn to in those tough times. So Planted Not Buried is exactly that. I'm building a village that works together to all take that next step into reaching whatever our goals are and our winning season, so to speak. That it should not feel like you're alone. It should not feel difficult. It shouldn't, like, I know people that say, I don't even know where to get started. I have this goal, this job I want, but I don't even know where to begin. Okay, planted, not buried. Let's start there. So it is on Slack. You can definitely reach out to me and I can get you the link for that. I don't have a way to easily just send that out because I also want to make sure that people that are joining are like-minded people. I don't want it to get in the wrong hands.
Yeah.
As we've seen with us being virtual, I do know there were a number of issues around like hacks and random people joining Zoom meetings and stuff.
Oh yeah.
So I do want to make sure it's monitored and that no one is joining with the wrong intention. So if you shoot me a message, and that's on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, anything, I'm Renee P Washington across all social media. You can definitely let me know you're interested and I can get you information. But it literally is for any and everyone that feels like in some way they've been buried, but you've really just been planted. You're taking that next step to grow and step into your winning season.
Of course, we will link all of Renee's social media platforms, everything. That this is a group that when Renee invited me to, which I'm very honored you let me be a part of it, I was like, this is a great idea. And I just really enjoyed seeing all the support that people are giving each other. Like, you can promote your podcast, that's a space to do that essentially, and I really love it. And you host the Zoom meetings. I was just on last week, I think. Man, time flies. But anyway,
Yeah,
I mean,
literally a week ago.
it's a great community. It really is. So Planted Not Buried, once again, I will put all of her social media medias in the bio of this YouTube video, to make sure if you need anything like that, you can contact Renee and she'll get you hooked up.
Thank you, Josh. I appreciate that. And it is definitely a growing community. So I'm happy to have anybody that is interested and looking to have a network that feels like a family where you can really be supported, encouraged, motivated, given advice, whatever it may be. So hopefully it continues to grow and you'll be able to say that you were one of the first to help grow it.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing's for sure. I mean, interviewing you, Renee, ever since we connected, I was like, oh, wow, she does so much, and sort of like an inspiration, and continuing to grind through my podcast and doing what I do. So thanks for that as well.
Oh, I'm happy to inspire. I do remember us having the conversation, a few conversations on your podcast. So to have sponsors now, to have your own microphone, it seems like you were
Yep.
literally just looking for one yesterday.
The mic
It's
stand,
great
the
to
mic
see.
arm.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Oh, I see. I see. Oh, that's a good
because
one too.
this one's like keeps squeaking or something. I don't know, but I mean, Planted Not Buried, a perfect place. I was like, hey, does anybody know where to get one of these? Because you got to
Yep.
have the
There you go.
best to make sure like there are no interruptions during your podcast.
Absolutely.
Well,
Absolutely. Well,
one
I'm excited to see what you are continuing to do.
Hey, I appreciate that, Renee. But once again, Renee P. Washington, she has many hats. She is the game day host for the Philadelphia Union, a sports reporter for ESPN and Fox Sports. She hosts Beyond the Headlines with Renee Washington, and she does so much more that we just didn't have time to get to. So, but once again, Renee, thanks so much for being here with us. We really appreciate the time.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm glad we were able to make this happen. And I'm excited to see as you continue to grow as well what's next for you. So thank you so much, Josh, for all that you do.
Once again, you can find this exclusive interview with Renee P. Washington on the Kirby on Sports podcast YouTube page. Thanks again to our sponsors, PM Plus Reserves, Shenandoah Primitives in Chief Graphics. Until the next time, we say so long and peace out.